You are trapped in a room with no doors. No matter how hard you try, you can't escape. Sounds scary, right? But what if the door was never locked? What if the door was never locked? Idris felt trapped in a habit he hated. He masturbated every single day. He tried everything to break free, but nothing worked. The weight of his struggle pressed on his chest like an invisible burden, until one day an old village elder gave him a task so strange, so risky, that if he failed, the consequences would change his life forever. But here's the twist. Was the danger even real? Or was it all a trick? What happened next will leave you shocked. Easy's hands were trembling. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the walls of his small, lonely apartment. The dim glow of a flickering candle cast long, eerie shadows across the room. His heart pounded, not out of fear, but from the same sickening guilt that had tormented him for years. He was trapped in a habit he despised. It started like a harmless escape, a way to silence the loneliness, the stress, the frustration. But now it felt like he was locked inside a room with no doors. Every time he tried to break free, he found himself back in the same dark cycle. The ticking of the old wall clock echoed in his ears, a cruel reminder of time wasted. He had read books, watched motivational videos, even prayed. Nothing worked. Idris buried his face in his hands. Was this how he was meant to live? The thought gnawed at him like a relentless parasite, feeding on his despair. But then he remembered something an old friend once told him about, an old wise man who lived in a distant village. They called him Baba Dyke, a man known for giving strange advice that always worked in the end. Desperate, Ease packed a small bag and set off on a journey to find him. The wind howled through the night as he stepped outside, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. What he didn't know was that this journey would change his life forever. Idris arrived at the village after a long, tiring journey. His feet ached from walking, and his clothes were damp with sweat. He asked around until he found Baba Dyke's house, a small hut at the edge of a quiet forest. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood, and the distant sound of crickets filled the night. The old man was sitting outside, carving a piece of wood with a small knife. His hands, though wrinkled with age, moved with precision and purpose. He barely looked up when Ease greeted him. "Why have you come?" Baba Dyke asked without turning. Ease hesitated, then sighed, shifting uneasily on his tired legs. "Baba, I have a problem." "We all do." "No, Baba. This one is different. I have a habit. A bad one. I masturbate every single day. I've tried to stop, but nothing works. It's ruining my life." Baba Dyke finally looked up, his eyes deep and knowing, as if he could see into Idris's very soul. "And this habit," he said slowly, "it gives you pleasure, doesn't it?" Idris swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "Yes, but only for a moment. Afterward, I feel empty, ashamed. It's like I lose a piece of myself every time." The old man nodded, as if he had heard this 1,000 times before. He put down the knife and motioned for Idris to sit on a low wooden stool beside him. "Let me tell you a story," Baba Dyke said, his voice carrying the weight of many years. "There was a man who traveled from place to place. He had been walking for many days, and his legs felt heavy like stones. The hot sun burned his skin, and sweat dripped from his forehead. His throat was as dry as the desert sand, and worst of all, his food was almost gone. His stomach growled so loudly it sounded like a wild animal trapped inside him. Then, as he struggled to take another step, his tired eyes spotted something far away. At first, it looked like a shadow, maybe a trick played by the heat, but as he got closer, he saw it clearly. It was an old, lonely house standing in the middle of nowhere. The windows were cracked and the walls were covered in vines, as if time itself had forgotten it. His heart leaped with hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was food inside. Excitement filled his tired body, and he forced himself to move faster. His weak legs carried him to the house, and when he reached it, he grabbed the door handle with shaky hands. The door creaked loudly as he pushed it open, as if it hadn't been opened for years. Dust floated in the air, making him cough. Inside, the house was quiet and empty. Broken furniture lay around, and spider webs stretched across the ceiling. The air smelled old, like forgotten memories. Then he saw it. A table stood in the middle of the room, covered in dust, and on that table sat a single loaf of bread. His mouth watered instantly. His empty stomach screamed for it. Without thinking, he rushed forward, grabbed the bread with both hands, and tore off a big piece with his teeth. But the moment he bit down, he froze. Something was wrong. The bread was dry, hard. It crumbled in his mouth like sand. It had no taste, no warmth, no softness. It wasn't fresh. It wasn't delicious. It was old and stale, as if it had been sitting there for years. He forced himself to chew and swallow, but the rough texture scraped his throat. Each bite felt like a punishment, a cruel joke played by fate. His stomach wasn't empty anymore, but he didn't feel happy. He didn't feel satisfied. The hunger was still there, deep inside him. As he looked at the half-eaten loaf in his hands, a thought came to his mind. What if I had waited a little longer? What if I had kept walking just a bit more? Maybe I would have found a village, a warm meal, something better than this dry, tasteless bread. But I was too impatient. I grabbed the first thing I saw, and now I'm stuck with this. Idris frowned. Baba, I don't understand. What does this story have to do with me? His voice was filled with frustration, his brow furrowed in confusion. Baba Dyke smiled, the wrinkles on his face deepening with wisdom. Ah, young man, you will understand in time. But first I have a task for you. Ease leaned forward, his curiosity mixed with apprehension. Baba Dyke stared at Ease for a long moment before speaking, the flickering lantern casting shifting shadows across his weathered face. Idris, he said slowly, what I am about to ask you to do, you must do it. You have no choice. If you fail, there will be consequences. As his heart pounded, his palms growing damp. Consequences, consequences, he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. The old man nodded solemnly. Yes, if you do not complete this task, something very strange will happen to you. As he swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. What will happen? Baba Dyke sighed, his gaze distant as if recalling past failures. I will not tell you, but know this, many who failed this task before you never remained the same. A chill ran down Ease's spine. He didn't know whether to be scared or curious. Now listen carefully, Baba Dyke continued. For the next 7 days, every time you feel the urge to return to your habit, you must do something else instead, but not just anything. You must find something that challenges you, something that takes effort, something that feels difficult but meaningful. And remember, if you fail to do this, the consequence will come. Ez's throat felt dry, his mind racing with doubt. But, but what if I can't resist the urge? What if I slip? Baba Dyke leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes dark with mystery. Then you will see, he said. Ezzy left the village with a strange feeling in his chest. The trees whispered in the wind as he walked away, the old man's words echoing in his mind. Was Baba Dyke serious? What kind of consequence was he talking about? That night, when the familiar urge crept in, he panicked. The silence in his small apartment felt suffocating. Would something bad happen if he gave in? He wasn't sure, but he didn't want to find out. So, he forced himself to do something else. He went outside, took a long walk under the dim glow of the street lights, and started a conversation with an old neighbor he had never spoken to before. The next day, when the urge returned, he did push-ups until he was too tired to think, sweat dripping from his forehead as he gasped for breath. On the third day, he felt bored and restless. Normally, he would have returned to his habit without thinking, but fear gripped him. What if Baba Dyke was right? So he picked up a book instead, flipping through the pages under the soft glow of his bedside lamp. By the 5th day, something strange happened. He realized he was no longer doing the task out of fear of the consequence. He was doing it because he felt better. The fog in his mind seemed to lift, and he could think more clearly. For the first time in years, his mind felt clearer, stronger. By the 7th day, the fear had faded completely, and that was when he understood. And the truth, the mind's illusion. Easy returned to the village, ready to face Baba Dyke. The journey back felt different. The sky seemed brighter, the air fresher. I did the task, he said, his voice steady. The old man smiled, his eyes twinkling with satisfaction. Good, and tell me, what was the consequence? Ease hesitated, searching for an answer. Nothing happened. Baba Dyke nodded knowingly. Exactly. The consequence was never real. Ease's eyes widened, a wave of realization crashing over him. What? The old man chuckled, his laughter deep and warm. Ease. The human mind is strange. It does not always listen to reason, but it listens to fear. Sometimes we need to trick it into doing what is best for us. Ezzy felt a wave of realization wash over him, his heartbeat steadying. So, you lied to me. Baba Dyke shook his head gently. I gave you a choice. You could have ignored the task, but fear made you obey. And in doing so, you broke free. Ezzy sat down, his thoughts racing. He thought about the story Baba Dyke had told him before. The story of the hungry traveler. The traveler had eaten stale bread because he believed he had no other option. But if he had waited, he would have found a real meal. Ease had been the same. He had believed he had no control, that he was trapped. But the moment he thought there was a consequence, he proved that he could resist. The power had always been his. The final lesson, the key, was always in his hands. Ease looked up at Baba Dyke, his voice filled with gratitude. You tricked me into proving I was stronger than my addiction. The old man nodded, his expression wise and proud. Yes, because sometimes the only way to escape a prison is to realize the door was never locked. E smiled, a newfound confidence lighting up his face. He had been afraid of losing something, but now he realized he had gained everything. And just like that, he was free. The story of Ezzy teaches us a powerful lesson. Often, the greatest barriers in life are the ones we create in our own minds. Fear can trap us, making us believe we have no control, but the truth is, we hold the key to our own freedom. Change begins the moment we realize that the door was never locked. Thank you for watching my channel. Don't forget to check out more exciting and insightful videos that will challenge your perspective and inspire growth. With a voice like silk and venom, Queen Lamy commanded the mirror to reveal the truth she sought. The dim glow of torches flickered against the ornate chamber walls, casting eerie shadows as she spoke. Show me those who dare to challenge my supremacy, she hissed, her long nails drumming impatiently against the gilded frame of the mirror. The warriors of Akime dared not venture into their land, as stories had it that the giant, once upon a time, in the mystical kingdom of Akime, shrouded in fear and darkness, there reigned the female king of unparalleled power and dread. She was known as King Lamy, a name that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls. King Lamy held the entire village under her oppressive thumb, ruling with an iron fist and a heart of darkness. The scent of incense and burning herbs often lingered in the air, masking the underlying aura of dread. For years, she had sat upon her throne, her dominion unchallenged, her cruelty unmatched. No one dared to question her authority, for the punishment was swift and merciless. Stories had it that she ascended the throne through treachery and sorcery and had since maintained her dominance through a gruesome ritual that imbued her with unimaginable powers. It was said that Queen Lamy derived her powers from the most horrifying of sources, the severed manhoods of those who dared to defy her. Legend whispered of dark rituals performed under the pale light of the full moon, where she consumed the essence of her victims to fill her insatiable thirst for power. The very ground beneath the palace was rumored to be soaked with the blood of countless fallen men, their spirits forever trapped within its cursed walls. You may want to ask, are there men in the kingdom of Akim? No free man lives in Akim. The king's warriors roamed the lands and forests like wolves in search of men, capturing any unfortunate soul who crossed their path. These men were then forced into a life of servitude, their bodies used as vessels for the queen's twisted desires. Their ultimate task was to impregnate the women of Akime, for Queen Lamy held a deep-seated hatred for the male gender. And so, the men were sent out like pawns on a massive chessboard, their every move dictated by the whims of their merciless ruler. The echoes of their sorrowful cries sometimes reached the heavens, but mercy was never granted. But the horror did not end there. For when a woman became pregnant, she was taken to the queen's palace, where she would be kept under close surveillance until she gave birth. If the child born was a girl, she would be permitted to leave and eventually join the ranks of Akim's oppressed society. But if fate decreed that a male child enter the world, the queen's decree was swift and merciless. For in her twisted mind she saw male children as threats to her power and symbols of rebellion. Thus, any woman who bore a son faced a cruel fate. Her child would be ripped from her arms and eliminated. The wails of grieving mothers echoed through the halls of the palace, a mournful melody that never ceased. In the depths of her opulent palace, Queen Lamy stood before the ancient mirror that held the key to her dominion. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of enchanted candles, their flames dancing like spirits in the gloom. With a flicker of anticipation in her eyes, she uttered the incantation that would reveal the truth she sought. Mirror, mirror, show me if anyone is trying to take over my supremacy, she commanded, her voice dripping with venomous certainty. The very air in the chamber seemed to still, awaiting the mirror's response. In a moment, the mirror shimmered and shifted, casting forth an image that sent a shiver down Queen Lamy's spine, a reflection of her own fierce visage, unyielding and undiminished by the passage of time. A twisted smile spread across Queen Lamy's lips as she beheld the sight before her, a laugh of triumph echoing through the chamber like the tolling of a bell. The sound carried through the palace, sending a renewed wave of dread through the hearts of those who served her. For in that fleeting glimpse, she saw not only her own image, but the undeniable proof of her enduring power. With a sense of satisfaction, Queen Lamy turned away from the mirror, her confidence renewed and her grip on the throne unshakable. For as long as the mirror reflected her forceful presence, she knew that her supremacy remained unchallenged and that no one dared to defy the might of the wicked Queen of Akim. Stay tuned as the main story is about to unfold. Don't forget to like and subscribe. One day, a woman named Zara discovered that she was pregnant. She had been pregnant before, but her baby was eliminated as it was a male child. So she decided to hide her pregnancy for fear of being taken to the queen's palace. With each passing day, Zara's belly swelled with new life, a secret she guarded with fierce determination. She moved with caution, shrouding herself in loose garments, avoiding the prying eyes of the queen's watchful guards. But as her time drew near, the walls of the village seemed to close in around her, suffocating her with fear and uncertainty. Whispers of Zara's pregnancy began to spread like wildfire through the village. She knew that her time was running out. Memories of her previous pregnancy haunted her, the pain of losing her precious son to the queen's merciless decree still fresh in her mind. Each night she lay awake, whispering silent prayers to the spirits of the land, hoping that fate would grant her a miracle this time. Determined not to suffer the same fate again, she resolved to escape the clutches of Queen Lamy and her dreaded palace. She knew that she could not bring her child into a world ruled by such darkness, where innocence was snuffed out before it ever had a chance to bloom. But would she be able to escape? Under the cover of night, with only the moon as her witness, Zara stole away from the village, her heart pounding in her chest. With each step she took towards freedom, she knew that her journey would be perilous, fraught with danger at every turn. But she refused to let fear dictate her fate any longer. The cool night air carried the distant sounds of the palace guards, their torches flickering like fireflies against the darkened landscape. Through the dense forest and treacherous mountains, Zara pressed on, her determination unwavering. Even as exhaustion threatened to claim her, she dared not rest. not until she had crossed the border and left the kingdom of Akim far behind. But Queen Lamy's reach was long, and her spies were everywhere. As Zara ventured deeper into the unknown, she could feel the queen's gaze upon her, a cold presence that sent shivers down her spine. The rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl made her startle, her nerves fraying with each passing hour. With each passing day, the fear grew stronger, threatening to consume her whole. Still, she pressed on, driven by the fierce love burning within her heart. For she knew that her child deserved a chance at life, free from the tyranny that had plagued her homeland for far too long. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of hardship and struggle, Zara reached the border of Akim. With tears of relief streaming down her face, she stepped across the threshold into a new world, one filled with hope and possibility, the land of giants. The air was different here, crisp and heavy, with the scent of unfamiliar flora. She took a deep breath, savoring the first moment of true freedom she had ever known. But even as she breathed in the sweet scent of freedom, she knew that her journey was far from over, for Queen Lamy's reign still cast a dark shadow over the land of Akim, and there were others like her who longed to see it toppled. Back in Akime, as Queen Lamy peered into the depths of her dark mirror, her eyes blazed with a hunger for power. She awaited the revelation of the kingdom's secrets. With each incantation and twisted ritual, she renewed her hold over the ancient magic that bound her to the mirror's sinister gaze. At first, the mirror remained still, its surface as still as death itself. But as Queen Lamy's power surged forth, fueled by the essence of the men whose lives she had consumed, the mirror began to stir, its surface rippling with malevolent energy. Shadows danced across the chamber walls as the flames of nearby torches flickered violently, responding to the queen's growing wrath. With a voice like silk and venom, Queen Lamy commanded the mirror to reveal the truth she sought. Show me those who dare to challenge my supremacy. And as if in response to her dark desires, the mirror shimmered and shifted, casting forth images of her subjects in the twisted tableau of fear and subservience. But amidst the sea of familiar faces, one figure stood out against the darkness, a woman heavy with child, concealed within the depths of the forest. A surge of rage and indignation coursed through Queen Lamy's veins as she beheld the sight before her. How dare this mere mortal defy her will, flaunting her disobedience in the very heart of her kingdom? With a flick of her wrist, she summoned her most loyal enforcers, commanding them to hunt down the interloper and bring her to justice. The scent of burning herbs filled the chamber as she strengthened her spell, ensuring her soldiers would find no rest until their mission was complete. And so Queen Lamy's minions set forth into the forest, their hearts consumed by a fervent zeal to uphold their queen's twisted reign. Through the tangled underbrush and shadowed glades, they pressed on, their footsteps echoing as they closed in on their unsuspecting prey. The land of the giants is one dreaded by the warriors of Akim. Though the giants are mostly men, the warriors of Akim dare not venture into their land, as stories had it that the giants eat people, especially their enemies. Zara was happy that she had left the shores of Akim. She would rather be eaten by the giants than have her child killed by the evil queen. Just then, she heard huge footsteps and quickly hid herself inside a nearby cave. As Zara cowered within the safety of the cave, the earth beneath her feet trembled with each thunderous footstep. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and anticipation, as she braced her fear and anticipation as she braced herself with bated breath. The damp walls of the cave were cold against her skin, and the faint trickle of water echoed eerily in the darkness. She prayed that whatever approached would pass by without noticing her presence, for she knew all too well the dangers that lurked beyond the safety of her hiding place. For she knew all too well the dangers that lurked beyond the safety of her hiding place. In that moment, labor came upon her with merciless swiftness, each contraction a searing reminder of the peril that surrounded her. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she clutched at the uneven ground, her fingers curling around the rough texture of the stone. The footsteps drew nearer, their thunderous rhythm echoing through the depths of the cave like the beating of a war drum. Zara knew that she must summon every ounce of strength and courage within her to face the trials that lay ahead. With a final surge of strength, Zara pushed, her body straining against the overwhelming force of nature as she fought to bring her child into the world. The cave walls seemed to close in around her, trapping her within an ancient, sacred moment of birth and survival. And in that moment, she let out a loud cry of pain. The story of Zara teaches us a powerful lesson about courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of a mother's love. No matter how dark and oppressive the world may seem, those who fight for freedom and justice will always find a way forward. Fear and tyranny may chase us, but determination and hope will always light the path to a better future. Thank you for watching my channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more thrilling and inspiring stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. What would you do if you saw your mother turning into a bird in the middle of every night? Lamy was a curious and bright 14-year-old girl with short curly hair. She often played outside at home under the palm trees, running barefoot in the soft and warm soil, listening to the laughter of other village children. In the evening, she would help her mother prepare dinner, while her father shared stories of the day's work in the field. "Papa, how big are the yam to us this year?" Lamy would ask eagerly as they sat on the floor to eat their evening meal. Mr. Damie would smile warmly. "Ha, Lamy, oh my daughter, they are as big as your head. This season is going to be bountiful." Mama Adana chuckled softly. "Don't let your father fill your head with stories," she teased. "The yams are healthy but not that big." Lamy loved this moment, the laughter, the warmth of family. She had always admired how her parents worked hard and cared deeply for each other. The small clay lamps around the room flickered, adding a golden glow to their home, and the cool evening breeze wafted through the windows, carrying with it the scent of jasmine. But all of that was about to change. One night, something strange happened. Lamy had woken up from a bad dream, thirsty and needing a drink of water. She quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her parents, who were in the next room. As she tiptoed past the door, she noticed something strange. The door was slightly open, and she could see her mother standing by the window. At first, Lamy was about to call out to her, but then she froze. Something wasn't right. In the moonlight, she saw her mother changing. Mama Edana's shape seemed to stretch unnaturally, her body transforming into something monstrous. Can you take a guess of what? A huge bird with black feathers, glowing red eyes, and sharp claws. The transformation was terrifying, and Lamy's heart pounded in her chest. She watched in disbelief as the giant bird flapped its wings and flew out the window, disappearing into the dark night. Imagine a 14-year-old girl seeing such a disturbing image. Lamy stood there trembling. Was this real? Was her mother a witch? She had heard stories in the village about witches who turned into birds at night, but she never imagined it could be true, let alone happen in her own family. The soft chirping of crickets outside now sounded eerie, and the shadows in the room felt alive. For days, Lamy kept what she saw to herself. She couldn't understand what was happening and was too scared to talk to anyone. Every night she would lie awake, pretending to sleep, waiting to sleep, waiting to see, or waiting to see if her mother would change again. And every night, like clockwork, Mama Adana would leave the house in bird form. During the day, everything seemed normal. Mama Adana was her usual self, gentle, loving, and kind. She hummed while cooking and told Lamy stories of her own childhood. Papa Dami continued to work hard in the field, unaware of the dark secret of his wife. But Lamy's heart was heavy with fear. One afternoon, Lamy was helping her mother fetch water from the village stream. The sunlight danced on the surface of the water, and the rustling of leaves filled the air. She couldn't hold it in any longer. Mama, Lamy began hesitantly, her voice shaking. Do you ever have, strange dreams? Mama Adana smiled down at her daughter. Dreams? Oh, Lamy, everyone has dreams. Why do you ask? Lamy, unsure of how to continue, said, what if someone saw something strange at night? Like, someone turning into a bird. Mama Adana's hand froze for just a moment, but she quickly resumed pouring water into the clay pot. Her face remained calm, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Lamy, there are many strange things in this world, but not all of them are real. You should not worry about such things. Lamy nodded slowly, but the unease in her stomach only grew further. Weeks passed, and Lamy's fear of her mother deepened. Then one day, tragedy struck. Papa Dami was out working in the field when he suddenly collapsed. Villagers rushed to help him, but when they carried him home, he was weak, coughing, and barely able to speak. Mama Adana stayed by his side, her face full of worry. Lamy was heartbroken. She sat outside the house, listening to whispers of the villagers. The air was thick with tension, and the scent of burning firewood from nearby kitchens felt heavier than usual. Do you think it is a curse? One woman asked quietly. There have been rumors of strange things happening at night in this village. Another woman said, no. Another shook her head. Papa Dami is a good man. This could just be illness. Lamy's mind raced. Could her mother's secret be the cause of her father's illness? The thought terrified her. As days went by, Papa Dami's condition worsened. Mama Adana tried everything, herbs, prayers, and visits to the village healer, but nothing worked. The house was quiet, except for the occasional murmur of concerned neighbors. One night, as Lamy sat by her father's bed, she made a decision. She couldn't stay silent anymore. The next morning, after helping her mother with household chores, Lamy had to speak with her in private. Mama Adana looked at her with concern, noticing how serious her daughter seemed. Mama, she said, her voice trembling, I know your secret. Her mother's face went pale. What do you mean, Lamy? I have seen you at night. I have seen you turn into a bird and fly away. Lamy's voice cracked. Papa is sick because of it, isn't he? Her mother was silent for a long time. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized that her daughter had discovered the truth. She knelt down in front of Lamy, her hands trembling. Lamy, my daughter, it's not what you think, she whispered, her voice breaking. I, I never wanted this. I inherited this curse from my mother after she passed away. I never wanted to hurt anyone, especially not your father. Lamy took a step back, her eyes wide with shock. A curse. A curse. Yes, her mother said, tears filling her eyes. It is a terrible burden that was passed down to me, just as it was passed down to my mother before me. But I have never used it to harm anyone, Lamy. I would never hurt your father or you. I leave at night so that I don't bring harm to anyone. Lamy's heart ached as she saw the pain in her mother's face. She wanted to believe her, but the fear that had been growing inside her for weeks was strong. The faint sound of crickets outside the window filled the silence, adding to the unease in the room. But Papa is so sick, Lamy whispered. How can you say it is not because of you? Mama Adana shook her head, her voice thick with emotion. I swear to you, my daughter, I had nothing to do with your father's illness. It is a sickness of the body, not of the spirit. You must believe me. Lamy stood there, torn between fear and the love she had always had for her mother. Her mind was racing, her heart was pounding. Could it be true? Was her mother really cursed and not evil? She didn't know what to think. A gust of wind swept through the open window, causing the curtains to flutter. Lamy could not keep the secret any longer. One evening, as her father's condition worsened, she decided to speak up. Her family needed to know the truth. Gathering her courage, she called her aunts, uncles, and cousins to their home. The family gathered in the small living room, their faces filled with concern. Papa Dami lay on his mat. He was weak and feverish, barely able to speak. Lamy stood in the center of the room, a small frame shaken with fear and determination. She took a deep breath, glancing at the flickering lantern casting shadows on the walls. Do you think a mother would allow her to reveal the secret? Let's watch out. Dami finally spoke. My mother is not who you think she is, she began, her voice trembling. She's been hiding something from all of us. At night, she turns into a big bird. Gasps filled the room. The family members looked at each other. They were shocked and confused. Mama Adana lowered her head. Tears were streaming down her face. She couldn't deny it any longer. One of Lamy's hands trembled. She's been hiding something from all of us. At night, she turns into a big bird. Gasps filled the room. The family members looked at each other. They were shocked and confused. Mama Adana lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't deny it any longer. The soft rustling of leaves outside seemed to echo the tension in the room. One of Lamy's hands trembled as Amaka stepped forward. Is this true? Have you been hiding this from us? Mama Adana nodded slowly, unable to meet her sister's eyes. Yes, it is true, but it is not something I chose. It is a curse that was passed down from my mother. I have been trying to control it, to keep it from hurting anyone, but I would never harm a child. I would never harm any of you. The room fell into a heavy silence as the family tried to process what they had just heard. Some of the relatives exchanged worried glances, while others murmured under their breath. A distant owl hooted, breaking the stillness of the night. Do you think the family is going to expose her to the public? Let's watch out. Suddenly, Lamy's uncle, Amaka,